I mean, we could start with that because that's a juicy. I want to hear what he had to say about that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to Human Design Coffee Talk. Today we have Wyatt Dickson on. Wyatt is a 3/6 sacral manifesting generator, a musician wizard, and right-hand man photographer for Robert Kennedy Jr. And as well,
Videographer. I don't take
videographer,
photos. Don't let anyone
videographer.
get that twisted
No,
because I get
amazing
asked a
videos,
lot.
amazing videos. So if you see RFK's Instagram, you've probably seen some of Wyatt's work. And Wyatt's also a father to an almost 2-year-old and husband to his wife, Brooklyn. They're fantastic. I'm so excited to do this interview today. I've known Wyatt for a long time, and we're just going to get right into it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we hopped on, we were just shooting the shit and we were asking Wyatt what it's like to have innocence motivation and also have an alpha channel. And the way Brandy phrased it was you're just naturally going to fall into being seen as an alpha. You don't have to try, you don't have to have an agenda. And Wyatt was going to explain to us what that felt like.
So yeah, I think there's a part of it that I guess is outside of human design that I'm a Scorpio, but my something is a Leo. I think my moon is a Leo and my rising is Libra, or those are switched. I always forget. But either way, it's basically like I see myself as this very exuberant, outward person, but people see me as like Bruce Wayne or whatever, like that I'm this like dark, brooding, complicated character, which I am, but like, so it's this weird flip where it's like I think that I'm the leader and the center of the universe, but everyone else sees me as this kind of like reclusive, you know, dark character or whatever Scorpios are. And um but what happens is that if I just am myself and I speak up for what I want, then people just listen to me. And so it happens in friend groups a lot. It happens in work and things like that, where if I, and it's not a way of being pushy, but it's like if I have the loudest opinion or the most like confident opinion on something, it usually goes my way, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like it just happens naturally. It's not necessarily a um, thing that I want. It's just like I think that something should happen, and then it happens because no one else has an opinion or wants to step into authority. So it's kind of like I think it works in both ways where it's really egotistical in a way. It's like I truly believe that I'm right, and then speak up and no one argues about it. And I'm like, okay, then that's what's happening.
And I've seen this play out too. And I know for those of you that are listening, you might like hear that ego in him. But when it's happening, why it's like a big kid. You know,
Yes,
it's
that, yeah.
not coming from this I'm on a pedestal. It's just he's always just like playing and doing his own thing and being an amazing weird wizard, and he just naturally is influential. And so people want to hear what he has to say because they can, if you're looking at Wyatt from across the room, you're just kind of like in wonder and awe. The first time I met you was down in Austin, Texas. And I remember you just kind of like grabbed my attention. I was like, there's something about that guy that it's like fascinating and I don't know what it is, but just kind of watching you and I can see your design playing out in the first time that I interacted with you. And it was just very much like this wondrous. And then we got on that thing. What's it
The
called?
like tilt-a-whirl or
Till it's
whatever.
like,
Yeah.
the merry-go-round. There was like this merry-go-round thing that was like caged in, and it was just like this. We were like spinning around on it, and it was just like, who's this guy? There's something about this guy that's just
That
like,
was
I want,
on it by himself at
yeah,
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You were just doing what you wanted to do, and like a couple of us went over there and got on it, and then it was just like you doing what you want to do, and it's like, I want to know what you have to say. I want
Mm.
to know how you think. I want to know how you live. I just want to know you know, it's very influential,
Yeah.
but
And I
not
think a
from
good,
this like I know what's best place. It's just like you're like I'm doing me.
mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think a good distinction is that, yeah, it has to come from that, like, yeah, it has to come from a place of innocence almost for it to work.
Hmm.
Because if it's an effort to be authoritative, then it just comes off the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's leading from childish wonder and exploration and just wanting, really just wanting what I want and going for it. And then in turn, um, leads people to listen and go in that direction. And you even reminded me of that, like, I don't know, maybe this past summer, that I didn't need to prove anything to people, that it
Hmm.
was, it was um, it was less, yeah, it was less about being seen in a certain way versus like just emanating that, that presence, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, where it's a natural emergence over
Hmm.
a calculated
Hmm.
plan, because every time I've had a calculated plan for those things, it just doesn't.
That is exactly innocence. That's
Yeah.
I'm desire motivation. So I'm your transference. Like what happens in human design is it has to do with how your mind works and it will what we call transfer to the opposite side. So basically there's motivation and there's your opposite motivation that it can move to. And so I'm your opposite, which is what you can move to sometimes. And that's what you're describing is it just doesn't work when you're coming from that place. For me, I almost have to have an agenda for it to work. And I have to be thinking about what other people might, not necessarily what they might want, but kind of moving from that place of like, I wonder what people will follow when it comes to what I'm saying. And if I'm just too loosey goosey with it and I don't have an agenda, it's almost like nobody cares. So,
That's really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's the complete opposite. Like if I'm like gonna talk to an employer or something about getting a raise, it's like the worst thing that I can do is
Mhm.
bring data to the conversation and be like, "Hello, I deserve all of these different things because I've done X, Y, and Z." And it would almost be better for me to be like, you know, just look at me, check this out, and
Yeah.
instead of, yeah, instead of having the desire, which I think I've noticed in myself, that I know people can feel my want, like the yearning for something really bad, and it's almost like repulsive.
Mm,
So if I have that agenda, maybe I'm just acting weird because I feel strange that I want something from a person, but like I can tell they know that I'm like beating around the bush trying to get something that I want, rather than almost innocently asking for it or receiving it just by osmosis, if that makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good way of describing it. I love hearing people who don't use human design as a language just describe what it is because it almost comes out even better
Hmm.
than those
Hmm.
of us who have like read about it and studied it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just how he lives. And so that's why it shows up.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you're what we call a transitionary profile, which is also kind of goes hand in hand with being innocence motivation. My husband is also a 3/6 like you. And I noticed that your profile in particular is really good at helping other people communicate. It's almost like you're here to bridge this gap between communication.
Mm,
And that's a little bit where that innocence plays in because if you have an agenda, you're not really going to be able to see both sides of something, right? You're not going to be
yeah.
unbiased and objective when you're looking at something. Do you notice that showing up in your life where you tend to be helping people communicate?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I have, I definitely have one of the most like nuanced ways of speaking and describing things of anybody that I know. And so when there's errors in communication or people aren't getting along, I can often get them to like see each other with that level of nuance, rather than I don't think of myself as like a mediator, or that's what I'm like trying, my parents divorced when I was young, and I don't think that I'm like trying to keep my parents together or something by always trying to solve problems. You know how that can come up with people where someone had a really unstable household and now they're just trying to fix everybody. I don't think it's coming from that place, but it feels like yeah, just something that I'm good at, and it just happens. It happens naturally. I think a huge theme in everything I've learned about human design is letting things happen. It's like it just is. Um there's no way to force it. So I think that when it comes to helping people communicate, it's the same thing. It just will come up as a thing if I'm being like brought into the room or like brought onto a phone call. I don't think that's the right place, because that's where the bias and um like being myopic about it would come in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. One sec, guys. I have to change my Wi-Fi connection. It's
Means her husband's on a call.
Oh, I see.
good. Okay, am I back?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Anyways.
One thing I mean, there's so much about your chart that I want to touch on. One thing that you just said when I first had a Zoom call with you and I was like, Wyatt, I want to go over your chart. How did it feel when you heard that you don't have to force, push, or initiate anything anymore?
I did not like it,
Mm,
because that's all I'm used to. Like so my not self theme says frustration,
hmm
and I'm just used to my entire life being frustrating. Like I'm just pushing for stuff and it just doesn't happen. Like that's all that I know. I'm basically used to being uncomfortable and frustrated all the time. And so it's because that's what I know, then the idea of things just happening as they should is uncomfortable, because it's not known. And so the funny part about that is that like literally all of the best things in my life have just been stuff that just happened in my favor, that I had, maybe I had done something to earn it or put myself in that position, but it wasn't anything that I planned to do. Like
Mhm.
working for the Kennedy campaign
Yeah,
just like really just came out of nowhere.
I'd love to dive into your work history since I've known you. So, we met in 2018 at a mastermind in Austin, Texas that Aubrey Marcus was putting on. What
2019.
2019? Well, yeah, 2019. What was your what was your job then? And then let's talk about your
At the time, I was in the wrong city, in the wrong relationship, and I guess the right relationship for that time, but like I knew that I'd known for a while that we had like outgrown each other and, grown in different directions, and wasn't really sure of or I always knew what I wanted to do, but I felt incapable of it. Like it wasn't happening for me. Like I was just kind of spinning my wheels and suffering. And so I was doing some video work, a lot of copywriting, interestingly enough, and then um, asking my parents for money as well at the same time. And so I was kind of a washed up, lazy boyfriend, basically playing video games all the time and just, wasting away. And then this moment of invitation came to me, basically, where I was recording a podcast, or I was doing a solo podcast at the time, and I recorded a short like response to a podcast that Aubrey Marcus had done with Eric Godsey. And I sent it to him on Instagram. I sent it to Eric and was like, hey, I really liked your ideas in this. And so here are my thoughts basically on this idea. And he said, yeah, I'd love to be on your podcast. And I was like, that's not what I was asking.
Eric.
And so then I just lied to him and I said, oh, that's so funny. I'll be in Austin in 3 weeks because I lived in Houston. And I just made it up. And so then I walked into the living room and told my ex-partner and was like, hey, we're going to Austin in 3 weeks. And then just went and did the podcast with him. And we recorded it at on it in Aubrey's office. And when I left, my ex picked me up in our car, and I got in and was like, I know that guy. Like, and she was like, yeah, you just podcasted with him. And I was like, no, like I was like, he's my friend. Like we work together. Like I had this really, really intense feeling of like remembering almost just by doing that. And so when you met me, I was like convinced that I was going to work for Aubrey and that I was going to move to Austin. And I hadn't yet when we met. And it was actually at that meeting that I gave Aubrey and Eric a flash drive that had a video resume basically on it that was like, here's who I am, here's what I've done, and here's what I can do for you. And they happened to be looking for a videographer and editor at the same time. And so it was like, perfect synchronicity, but it was led by um this really emergent feeling that I wasn't used to experiencing at that time. And it was just this feeling of like, you work for Aubrey Marcus, you live in Austin, you're friends with Eric, you are going to leave your relationship. Like it was just such a like huge feeling that I just had all the time. And then it came true. So it was,
I want to point out real quick too, parts of your design that I'm kind of seeing in this. You are acceptance sense, which is it's a little bit deeper in human design.
mhm,
You are probability view, so it's like you can see what's probable. You're also inner vision, so being like, I can see that I am friends, I can see that I'm living, it's like you're getting this unseen data,
mhm.
which can make it feel like we're psychic or, but it's just like
Yeah,
you're seeing the probability of your future.
yeah,
And you're a sixth line, so it's like we're in the transition. It's like we can see the future.
yeah. That
There's,
is what it feels like.
yeah.
And I just had a conversation about this um yesterday. I went over to the Bursma's house. They have a house in Austin now,
Mhm.
and they had a little shindig over there. And so I stopped by before heading to basketball at Aubrey's house. And it basically someone came up and was like, every time I talk to you, you've had some crazy vision that came true.
Mm.
Like so you had a vision that worked, you worked for Aubrey, and then that happened, and then you had a vision that Brooklyn was your wife, and then that happened, which is another thing that happened shortly after I got the job working for Aubrey, was I had never really spoken other than, hey, I'm Wyatt, and that's it, to Brooklyn, and I saw her and was like, that's my wife. Like I just,
Yeah, you were like,
yeah,
that's my wife.
yeah. It just was so clear, and I had no logical reason to think that that was true. And then the same thing happened with Ama whenever Ama's my daughter. She um, came to me in a crystal clear vision and told me she was coming. And I was like, okay, that's happening. Whether or not I say yes to it, basically, that's just what it was. And then working for Bobby Kennedy Jr. was the same thing. It was just like so crystal clear, this vision, this inexplicable vision that came to me. And now I work for him. So I don't really know how it happens or why, but that's just kind of how my life for the past 5, 6 years has been, really.
Yeah.
Can you describe what a sacral response feels like for you? So, when these opportunities come into your field and you are a yes to something, what does that feel like to you in your body?
Hmm. I don't know. it kind of feels like a, you know, whenever like a bathtub or a sink is emptying and it gets like a really, not a huge like whirlpool, but like that little tight, like it looks like a tiny tornado of
Mhm.
water. It's like that, but going up like through my
Oh, shut
body.
That's so
up. That's
good.
so
I'm gonna use that
It's
now from now on. Why?
Also,
yeah.
let's look at it for those of you on YouTube. For those of you not on YouTube, Wyatt has 214, 31.7, and 23.43. So he's sacral to
Straight up.
G to throat to ajna. And when you said that, I'm imagining the energy literally moving up your chart.
Yeah. I mean, it is, there's some sort of like chakra power center, you know,
Yeah.
chart thing going on for sure. I don't know what it is. I mean, sometimes it feels like I have to shit my pants. So, you know, it's all the
People,
same thing.
some generators have described a response as like a mini orgasm almost. So that's a new
Yeah.
one. Feeling like you need to shit your pants.
It's like, I mean, it's all the same
All the same
thing.
stuff.
And honestly, it feels like um if I'm unable to handle it, it's like it feels like my legs get cut off from my body.
Mhm.
It's really weird. It's like I performed at a music festival recently in October or in November. Um and it was, I don't know if it was a full moon, but something was happening that night where, this might be a long side note, but the festival was 4 days and I had arrived on the day of my set because I couldn't leave working for the campaign for that long. And apparently the first day was really messy, like some things, you know, technical things happened, and people from outside the festival had entered. They had like given day passes or something out to like drunk people in Las Vegas, and like it was just kind of a shit show. And you know, I guess they learned like a really hard lesson with how to, you know, coordinate everything. It was like things that you can't even count on went wrong. And then the next day was like really special, and everyone was like, yeah, like, okay, we're here. Forget the day before. Everything's great. Like, let's party. This is a good time. And then the day that I performed was like, it wasn't a mess, but it was really, really intense energy in the venue. Like everybody that I talked to was like, something's fucking crazy right now. Like it feels really shifty, not in a bad way, but just like hard to contend with. And almost like a full moon when it starts to feel a little squirrely, which we just had one like 2 days ago. And you know, it's like you're vibrating and like crackling with that exciting and scary energy at the same time. And we were in my trailer before my set and I was freaking the fuck out. Like I had my own, you know, pre-show jitters, but I was like, something else is happening right now that doesn't feel like it's just me. And by the time I got onto the stage, there were at least 500 people just waiting there already. And I was like, oh my God. Like I couldn't even feel my legs because there was so much happening. And it was like, I know this is a yes, like in your language. And I know that I'm supposed to be here and that I can do this, but like, holy shit, I can't even contend with this. And it was like my body just cut itself in half. So I spent the first like 20 minutes of my set like jumping and stomping and like shaking my legs out, trying to get my energy to go like throughout my whole body. And eventually it did. And, you know, I grounded in that place and had an amazing time. But there was like this just explosive, like manic energy in the whole place that, like, when my intro song dropped, like people were screaming at the top of their lungs. And I was like, this is a room of werewolves. Like it was just so crazy. And so, yeah, it's like, I think that's a good example of when maybe that sacral response it turns into a full, you know, water spout as opposed to just this like controlled spiral of energy. And so, those things are fun too.
Mm-hmm. So your wife, Brooklyn, is emotional, and in human design, emotional authority takes a little bit longer to come to a decision than people like you and I that are sacral. We're in the moment, we're kind of impulsive. Somebody says, hey, you want to work for Bobby? And you're like, uh-huh, right now. It's very quick.
Yeah.
How is it for you? And your daughter's also emotional.
Mhm.
How is it for you making decisions in your relationship with somebody that takes longer?
Hmm. What's interesting is I don't feel like she takes a long time to make decisions. So maybe she is acting out of accord with her chart, maybe. Because my experience is like, well, one, she often wants decisions made for her. And maybe that is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's
Like
the
usually
yeah,
if
yeah,
she wants something, she's like, I'm getting it. Like I have, and in fact is so steadfast in that it's like impossible to talk her out of it
yeah,
as well. So
yeah.
yeah, so I don't really know what my experience would be. I definitely think things go better if I just make the decision and
Mm.
not like, try to pull you know, put both of them on a leash and be like, we're going this way. Um, but yeah, if it is a natural and inspired decision on my part, and she feels like I have decided on our behalf, that's usually a better
Mhm.
a better
Is it
scenario.
is it usually in regards to like the direction that you guys are gonna go, or just like making decisions about that, like maybe as a family? Um,
Um, yeah, or eating dinner. That's the big one.
that
That's the
technically is
Yeah,
direction because you're
yeah,
going somewhere.
that
yeah.
is true. Yeah. And I think
Um,
like I don't like to, they both are very like they love like adventures and I don't like adventures that much. Like I don't want to leave the house. Like a perfect day for me is spending time with them and then making music. And so it's like I feel like I'm often out of my element trying to keep up with going to the park and going to get a, local bagel or something. Like it just doesn't click for me as something really that I want to do. And yeah, so I think when I'm like, yeah, we're going to this person's house, it just, yeah, things feel better. And then for her, I imagine, I'm trying to think, she she must take her time with decisions because she does a ton of research. Like she
Yes.
collects,
She's a 5-1.
yeah, like
So
okay,
oceans
yeah.
of data.
investigator, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
maybe that is part of the decision making process where it's just like, weeks of researching a thing and reading all of these books and like collecting all of the information. And then she's certain about the thing. So
Yeah.
all I see is her being certain about the thing. So maybe that's what I'm missing and not seeing that decision part because with like pregnancy and birth and childcare, it's like she'll spend months, immersed in all of the information and then generally comes out of it with like a very, very strong um, belief or decision being made on how she wants to handle that.
Yeah, she's building a foundation. First lines are all about building a strong foundation. So,
Yeah.
and I feel like 5-1s are known to not show people all the research that they've done necessarily. It's almost
Yeah.
like that's going on in the background, and then like you said, you just see this confident decision, and you don't know the insecurity that's going on underneath the surface unless you're really paying attention to what she's looking into and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
does feel that way often where and that's how all of our friends see her. They're just like, holy shit, she's an ocean of wisdom. She's like an archive of just all of this information. Like she knows everything about everything. and they just assume that she is that way, not that she spent all of this time collecting and internalizing all of that. Her, I mean, she really is like a researcher almost. Like her ability to recall little tidbits of information about stuff is insane. So,
Yeah. Ama will probably be similar. She's a 1-3, so she has that investigator researcher on the personality side, and 1-3s are like that too. So you're in a
yeah,
house with two women that are just going to be eating knowledge.
yeah,
Receipts.
that's yeah, that's good. Yeah, Brooklyn is like impossible to quote unquote win an argument with because I'm only acting on emotions and feelings. I'm just like, it feels this way. And she's like, name one time. I'm just like, can't. I do not collect that information. I'm just telling you how I feel.
She's also defined ego, so
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's got to be some ego
she's
energy.
gonna be like, prove it to me
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, prove it to
100%.
me. And your
That's
open ego's like, I can't prove it to you.
I made a like a pact with myself basically that I would not speak negatively or like air my dirty laundry about her with people where it was like, it just I don't know, it became apparent where it's like, oh, like, my closest friends just must have a horrible opinion of her because for the past 2 years, anytime she's come up in conversation, it's been like, oh yeah, this thing is challenging or whatever, but they don't see or hear any of the good stuff. So I decided to remain neutral about that so that I wouldn't, just be sharing my emotional burdens with people that would then, and this goes with actually all relationships really, like it's not fair for you to give someone your hardship about a person because then that colors how they feel about that person in return, right? And in doing that, the only quote unquote negative thing that I would say about her is that she's a Taurus, is basically the
Which among
thing.
spiritual
And
people, that means something, right?
yeah, they get the joke of like,
Yeah,
she's
it's just like,
stubborn and that's it,
well,
you know?
I feel like we do
We,
uh,
that in human design too. Like, well, I have a defined ego. So, but it's
yeah.
yeah,
it's meant to be said in a kind of neutral way of just you're accepting of the person. That's how they
yeah,
are. You have your
Yeah.
quirks too. And that's why I love talking about this kind of stuff on the podcast because it's just that's just what it is and we're accepting of it. And we might have issues with it sometimes, of course, because
Mhm.
differences can be challenging, but you also learn a lot from each other when there's differences like that.
And I just
oh
want to
yeah,
note that all
yeah,
three of us are acceptance sense. So we are like accepting,
Yeah, let's just
accepting.
accept this.
yeah,
Also, I
yeah.
can see a part of you that's protector, right? That protector part. And whether you don't know this about her design, but she is a
Mhm.
fifth line, and the fifth line carries a projection field. So
Mhm.
people are constantly probably projecting on Brooklyn, and you're probably
Mhm.
picking up on that feeling
Yeah,
and protecting her, trying to protect her from that, because it's like at one point somebody might put her on a pedestal, the next somebody might try to burn her at the cross, and you're like, that's not actually who she is at all.
yeah. So that's I think why I made that deal with myself of like I never want to contribute to whatever anybody else feels because regardless of the person, everybody has this like thing of what they think a person is. And so I'd rather them make that decision themselves rather than um, being fed information that goes one way or the other. And I think it also goes to in like talking people up too,
Mhm.
because then you're setting unreasonable expectations and, someone might
Mhm.
not have a good interaction with this person that you're saying is so wonderful. And they're like,
Mhm.
man, Wyatt's full of shit. That's
Yeah.
not true at all. But yeah, I
Right.
think, yeah, I do feel like protective in multiple ways. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. One thing I would like to talk to you about is the fact that you're a sixth line on the body side. The sixth line is the role model. We have the three life stages, first 28 to 30 years, we're in the rave.
Mhm.
Second 20 years, we're up on the second floor of the roof. We're observing, we're integrating our life experiences, we're more aloof. And then Chiron, we get back into the party, share our wisdom. That's our time to shine. Right now, I see that you just went through your Saturn return, May of 2023. So
So that's when it ended.
that's when it started. So you're on the move up to the roof. And for 6-line bodies, it can take us a while to like realize that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, and Teresa listened to this lecture. Do you want to tell him about it,
Yeah, so like I
Jonas?
said, I'm also married to a 3-6, and he's been on the roof for a few years now, but I've
I'm
known
on
him
the
since
roof too.
I've known him since we were 13. So I saw him before I knew him well before he went onto the roof. So I had this realization after listening to this lecture from Jonah Dempsey where he was talking about how 6 lines just kind of want to be on permanent vacation once they get to the roof because their life has been so chaotic up
Mhm.
until then that they're happy to have made it to the roof. And it feels like they're in this new phase of life where things are just kind of chill and there's you're almost in this kind of like protective bubble and things mellow out a lot more when you get to the roof and you're not wanting to try new things and just see what happens all the time necessarily. You're just a little more, I would say, conservative with what you choose to do.
Mhm.
And then you also don't necessarily want people to be bringing you life's problems. Like they can come to you for objectivity if they like want an objective perspective, but you don't want every single mundane problem coming your way.
Mhm.
And I had this realization of like whenever let's say I'm going through an emotional wave or I'm dealing with something and I go to my husband and I'm telling him about it, he's just kind of like, "Oh, they're there." It's kind of like he's almost removed from it a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
then when I need his objective
Guilty.
perspective, like he's amazing. And so I just kind of started seeing as like imagining he's metaphorically on vacation right now. And when I bring him life's mundane problems, he's kind of just like, I'm on vacation. Like, what are you bringing that to me for? I'll deal with that later in 20
Yeah.
years when I come off the roof, you know?
Yeah. I actually, yeah. So what am I on the roof or am I
You're
walking up the stairs?
you're like you're getting up there. You
I
might
would say you're
it,
walking up the
yeah,
stairs.
you're walking up the stairs. So
That is
it
what
should
it feels like because yeah, I feel like I'm handling a lot of the like rushing things pretty like, it feels pretty like benign, like just like, okay,
hmm
got it,
hmm
instead of it being like a reset that, or like 2 steps backwards that puts me, in this multi-week or like multi-month recovery process, if that
Yeah.
resonates.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would like to be on the roof. That
Yeah.
is that is where
Yeah.
I'm at. I feel like an old weathered soldier and I'm ready to,
Right.
you know,
Yes. Yes.
just have
Like I'm
things.
ready to hang my boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that probably feeds into the frustration and then the like manifesting part of me too, right? Where it's like I don't want to feel like I'm trying to force everything all the time. And I'd like those visions and those things happening to be a lot faster and more constant
hmm
rather than, you know, the things that I named, that was like what, five big things that became a reality over the course of like 5 years, which is great. Like those are all like life-changing moments, but I'm really ready for like in music, I just get a hit of like, oh yeah, you're going to produce a song with that person. And I text them and it's just done, like it just is, or I
hmm
run into them somewhere and it's that simple. Like it's just, you're just in the flow and I'm not experiencing that like beating my head against the wall sensation that I'm so used to. So I'm
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
ready for that. And I turned 30 this year. So I think
Yeah.
that it's apt that that's happening. Like I turned 30 right before the election. And when that's over, it's either going to be what I feel is it's either going to be I commit to making videos like for the country basically and have that be my like contribution to society, or I go completely into music and that just, unfolds and we're suddenly headlining, on this really quick thing. My intuition is you have to work a little bit longer and harder to headline than just one moment. Um, so yeah, I don't know what it looks like, but I feel like it's going to be fundamentally different than you know, sending emails to clients and being like, hey, please work with me. I'm really good at this thing. Like, I'm just so fucking done with that. I
Yeah.
can't even describe that. It's like I work best when things come to me, and so I'm really ready to step into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the thing with MGs to keep in mind, we tend to think we need to commit to one path and then like really stick to that path. And
Yeah.
then what I've found is time and time again, I will be pulled in multiple directions or kind of be able to juggle multiple things at once and be able to handle that. And that's actually what keeps me stimulated and like excited about life. And then when I have tried to commit to one path, I get bored. And so
Mm,
don't be surprised if like you do commit to a path, but then maybe there's still opportunities in other areas and you're kind of just juggling it. You know, it doesn't mean you can't like
yeah.
focus on something, but we tend to do better when we're kind of doing multiple things at once, being that multi hyphenate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what it feels like. You know, there was a kind of lull in the activity on the campaign. There was like a little bit of a period where we needed to figure some things out and like, you know, balance or I guess like reevaluate what our priorities were. And so I wasn't getting a lot of messages from people. It was like, you know, a lull in communication or a lull in activity. So there weren't, you know, as many objectives and things like that. And I was like, well, what do I do with myself? And I was like, well, I could force making things in service of trying to make everyone think I'm valuable and like doing like working really hard, or I can focus on what is like apparent and in front of me, and that was making music and being with my family. So it was like
Mm,
that's,
hell
you
yeah.
know, it was a great um balance, like a counterforce to everything that was going on. So it, you know, there will be these periods where I don't touch music and I'm working, you know, wall to wall, day in and day out on these video projects. And then all of a sudden I don't hear from people for 3 days and I'm like, cool, I'll make a new song. You know, it's like a thing where, you know, you can, I do often have discipline to just do stuff on my own. Like no one has to come to me to do certain things. Um, but yeah, I almost need that contrast, you know, just
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
make, even if I have to force it, like make time to experience the variety and like creative outlets or how I spend my time. And
Yeah.
even if that means that I'm not sleeping as much or whatever, like I feel like I just need that to exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like what you were describing before, MGs tend to be the most conditioned of the generators to be like manifestors, which means
Yeah.
oftentimes we're running headfirst into resistance. And it's almost like the resistance can be beating us over the head. And we're just still, it's like a brick wall that we're still trying to run through, you
Yeah.
know? And so when you were talking about just not wanting to do that anymore, like that is in your nature to not operate that way. And we think we need to operate that way, but we really don't.
Mm.
So yeah, I think you're just maybe feeling into your body more now that you've matured and grown and you're saying, I that's not how I operate. And that doesn't work when I do try to operate that way.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, there are countless examples recently have shown me that, you know, like the flight that I'm getting on later, I'll spare the details and stuff like that, but that project was very much like not something that I needed or was ordered to do. It was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. That sounds exactly like what fits the bill for me, rather than yeah, rather than forcing it myself or being forced. You know, we've all had experiences with work where you do something that you don't want to do and you do it because it's the right thing to do, but there's this sense of like frustration and resistance the entire time. This doesn't feel that way. It
Yeah.
feels like, oh yeah, duh, like of course I'll go do that. So I
Yeah.
have grown now really to appreciate those yeah, to appreciate those moments of like of feeling a yes and it just happens effortlessly and the things are all in place and I don't need to think about it too much, rather than yeah, rather than like toiling around in all of these mundane, frustrating details, and then also the physical resistance in the body, like the visceral resistance is also a big thing that I'm tuned into.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. If we could sum up following your strategy and authority, it's really just learning to differentiate the difference between resistance and flow in your body. And what you just described, I think about it as like a green light effect where you're just hitting green lights. It's that same feeling as when you're commuting somewhere and every green light, there's no flat tires, there's no red lights.
Yeah,
So it's when you're a yes to something, you have the energy for it. It comes to you to respond to. You didn't have to force it. That's just what it feels like.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
It's very nice.
what I can hear too is I can hear you getting up on the roof. I can,
Mhm.
because when we get up on the roof, we can integrate our life experiences, and we're kind like when we're in the rave, we're trying all the drinks, we're dancing with this group, dancing with that group, mixing it all together, almost dying 17 times, wondering how we are even alive,
Yeah.
you know? And there's a little bit of that like we call it third line life PTSD, where it's like, oh, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to operate that way anymore.
Yeah.
I want to go a little slower. I'm going to pull back. I'm going to integrate this. And I can just hear that wisdom already coming from you.
It's the phrase I like to use is power versus force. There's a really good book called Power versus Force that's about the energetics of like drawing things to you versus trying to make things happen. And I mean, man, the countless, especially when it comes to work and business, like I wish there was a way to just constantly manifest opportunities for yourself. Like I know it doesn't actually, like you have to show up and have some kind of discipline in order to welcome those things. But I wish that like the universe, like everybody in the world just knew that Wyatt was an open line for
Yeah.
work. Like that it just popped into their head and they were like, "Oh yeah, of course, I'll call him." Like I don't even have to tell, they don't even have to be aware of me. They just know like, "Oh, I remembered his phone number even though I've never met him before." I just wish that it was like that because the like disciplined entrepreneur path has never felt like that's actually my zone of
Mm,
genius. It's been really challenging to be like, okay, sit down at my computer and I send, you know,
yeah.
10 emails and I upgrade my website and I post this thing and I run this ad, like has never clicked with me. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. I think sometimes that might be the open ego because I'm a completely open ego as well. And some of the things I see Brandy and like my husband doing, both defined egos.
You guys even have the same things pointing.
Yeah. Yep. We have pressure on our egos. It's almost like we think we need to be that way because we see other people doing it and maybe it works sometimes, but it's not really enjoyable for us. And
Yeah.
again, it's like feeling like you have to prove your worth, feeling like you have
Yeah.
to prove to people versus just like showing up. Like a lot of the traditional stuff that coaches do, I've never responded to. I'm more the
Yeah.
type of person like, I'm going to get on a live stream and just show people what I can do.
Mhm.
I'm not going to try to convince anybody. I'm just going to say, this is my work. This is what I love doing. If you feel called to work with me, cool. Versus like, I'm going to send all these marketing emails and try to convince people to work with me. That feels
That's
so
yeah.
icky for me.
That's wise. I'll keep that in mind in the future because that does feel like how it, at least for myself, is supposed to be. Like that
Yeah.
exactly how you described, just like yeah, emanating whatever it is that you are in that moment. And if people like it, then great. There's no, I don't want to put pressure. Like that's the thing that feels weird to me is I don't want to put pressure on people to see me a certain way in any context, whether that's
Yeah.
like a sales context or a booking context or a friendship context either. There's actually quite a few connections I can think of where I've like really wanted this person to see me or like click with me in a certain way because I know that if they did, it would be a fruitful relationship. But the most fruitful relationships I have are almost like accidents. It was just like, like a great example was someone who I've been a really big fan of for a long time. Um, like oddly so, like that I've been like have probably seen like 50% of the content they've put out, the hundreds of videos over the years, came up to me after my last festival set and was like, dude, I loved it. Like I loved your show. And I was like speechless. I was just like, oh my God, I can't even believe you're talking to me right now. Like like one, that you're here, and that also, is just like such a shock to me. And now we're really close friends. And it, I could have forced that relationship and it wouldn't feel the same.
Mhm.
Like I could have, leveraged mutual friends, or, flooded his inbox and been like, I love you so much. Please hang out with me. And it wouldn't have been the same as this, like literally like an accident. Like I was just walking in a random place and just happened to cross paths alone, like the only two people in the area with this person. So it's like, I
You
don't know.
bumped
It's
into them.
right. Like,
That's the third line thing. You're bumping into people. Bumping.
Yeah. Like
yeah, I
you're
mean,
not a fourth line. So that would have been more fourth line to utilize your network and be like, hey, I really like that person. If you tell them I want to meet them or whatever.
yeah,
Third lines are designed just to bump into people. So
yeah.
you don't know when you're going to meet somebody. It's like you literally bump into them.
That's a good thing. There's an artist in particular that I'm really frustrated with right now that I've been trying to collaborate with for a long time, and it just doesn't seem to be clicking because I feel like I'm trying to force it too much, and I don't want to, turn him off and make him think I'm crazy or whatever. So I probably should just drop it, and if it happens, it happens.
Yeah. It sounds like you're meeting resistance. So
Yeah.
just drop it. And that might even be like going into desire and feeling like you have an agenda with that artist, whereas from innocence it
Mm.
would just be that that artist maybe sees your work and appreciates it and is like, oh hell yeah, I want to work with this person.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, because it to me it does feel like innocence, but maybe there is that element of having too much desire that it would, feel a little sticky in a way. Um, yeah, I mean, my best friend who I produce music with just was at my wedding. I didn't, like I said, yeah, sure, he can come with someone I was already friends with, but not like, it wasn't like I forced that interaction. It was just like, yeah, like truly just happenstance that put us in the same room together. And then from there became best friends. So it's, it's not a thing that, and then, yeah, same with Brooklyn. It was just like, in fact, it was in courting her, the most challenging thing was feeling like I was trying too hard. And then, so what happened was, it was at one of the Fit for Service events, so it's like what, 3 or 4 days. And on the first night is when I saw her and was like, that's my wife. And then over the course of the next few days, I tried really hard to talk to her, and I like couldn't get my foot out of my mouth. It was just like, just couldn't. She can tell you that you should have her on, and she can tell you the whole thing. Listeners will get a preview into what a dumbass I was for the entire weekend. I was just like insulting her, and I was like, damn it, like, why did I say that? That's not.
There's
And
a, we're pointing at a part of your chart.
is that a,
Unconscious genius to freak
Genius
where
freak.
oh, yep,
yeah.
there it is.
It's like sometimes you're a freak, sometimes you're a genius.
Yep, that is 100%. That might be the most true thing on the chart. Just being like, wait, what did he say? What? Why would you say that in front of people? Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. And then on the very last night, we were at some event, some kind of like after party thing. and she just came up to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to lay on this raft in the pool and talk to me?" And I was like, "Yeah." So it was, and we were literally just walking in the same direction or like towards each other at the same time. I didn't like seek her out and go, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And then, we talked, and afterwards I was like, "Okay, pretty sure that's my person." And then, months and months later we ended up dating, and so, yeah.
I love how she asked you a yes or no question too, so you could like really feel her response, and
Yeah.
you bumped into each other.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a great way of describing it, because I think people expect bumping into each other to be the first time you meet somebody. They expect it to be like a movie, like this serendipitous meet cute thing. And I feel like bumping into each other can happen where you like discover somebody that you've already known. And that's what it felt like. Where it's like, yeah, we
Mm.
had spoken before and crossed paths and had mutual friends and things. And then it was like a light bulb that went off. And that's what bumping into each other feels like to me.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to talk about your personality sun, which is in gate 28, the gate of the risk taker,
Hmm.
the game player.
Funny that earlier you were like, I don't like adventure. I'm
That's
going to attribute that to your lack of abstract circuitry though, because I think gate 41 is your only one in abstract circuitry, but that is part
and
of your
and he's crawling up on the roof, so he's like,
yeah.
catch myself doing that, and I just want to tell you why it release any guilt or shame you have about not being super involved, because I'm halfway through the roof. I'm 37. I'll be 38 this year. And I'm just very much like, I don't want to be involved. I'm on vacation in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
But
not getting on, I'm not getting on the helicopter.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
maybe you've developed wisdom though, because the line is called unfounded risk taking. And I wonder if maybe that was something you did more in your younger years.
Yeah.
we
Well, yeah,
also,
I would say so. Yeah. I moved around a lot, took um, some things I won't share on
yeah.
the
That's okay.
on the podcast, some, yeah, decisions and risks and life choices that, super questionable. So yeah, I would say that was a younger thing. I think that having getting married and having a baby obviously changes you, but I think it almost like fast forwarded the feeling of being on the roof, because it's like I knew what I wanted then, but then still had to like burn off the karma of the rave, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. Where it's like I had arrived on the roof early in some ways.
Or
And
you
then,
had this feeling that you were going to be going in that direction. You were kind of
yeah,
already moving in that direction. Yeah.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah, being a husband and father makes you like have to be on the roof in order to handle it and serve it in the right way.
Mm.
But then there was another part of me that was just like, well, I have to still burn off all of this, rave energy. And now it feels like, for the most part, that has subsided, and that I can, be, yeah, to be dad on the rooftop.
One of the most fascinating things when I first saw your chart, because I knew you in Austin when you were making that transition and kind of knew, like, saw on your online presence and who you were. And then I saw your conscious sun in gate 28. And we also look at this because these are fear gates. And so this is fear of not fulfilling your purpose, which we can also look at as like, what's the one thing that's going to take us from fulfilling our purpose? And that's death.
Mm.
What is your relationship with death?
Um, yeah, I feel like I'm afraid of it because I don't want to let go of what is here. it's like there's almost like there's not enough time,
Yeah.
Yep.
you know, like
We
that.
all have
Exactly
gate
it.
we all have gate 28 as well.
Yeah,
So,
like it
mhm.
just doesn't, like it would feel so tragic to have not had all of it, you know,
Yeah.
and to to leave things left unsaid, or you know, moments left unlived, like those kinds of things. And yeah, I also, for whatever, I guess probably through like different psychedelic experiences and things like that, it's like it's hard for me to like fully let go into those, and to
Mhm.
like trust the other side. And so yeah, death feels uncomfortable. Like the idea of it just feels, and I know everyone has that in some way, like that it's in our biology to like not want it. Um, but I think that also goes into the risk taking element too, where it's like I want to feel safe. I want to like not be like living on the edge of reality anymore, where it's like any sudden move could take you to the grave. So yeah, I think um yeah, I welcome it, and I like understand it, and I get the greater kind of like Thanatos vibe of death. And then especially like on the personality level, like the, you know, the ego deaths and rebirths, and like letting go of the old things, those are all really important. Which by the way, whenever we got engaged, I drew the death card.
Mm.
That's what I drew
Mm.
after getting in, like 20 minutes after getting engaged. Someone was like, here,
The
draw a
death of your
card. And I was
previous
like,
life.
Yeah.
I have a death card tattoo back here.
How gate 28 of
I
you.
know.
And
The
Scorpio.
And
Here's
Scorpio.
the skull. Oh yeah, there's the skull, and then the 13 is up there.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
black
so
and the yeah. And
yeah.
what did you do right before Fit for Service? I remember looking at your Instagram and it was like a whole bunch of death stuff. What was like what were you not death stuff, but like what brand were you? What was your
Oh
brand?
yeah, my friend's clothing
Oh, yeah.
line, Death
Yeah,
Comes
yeah.
With Him. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
helping him start that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so he has a horror and heavy metal themed uh fitness clothing company, and he actually just opened a gym too, where, and the slogan is fitness for the misfits, and it's basically
Yeah.
giving giving a safe haven to all of the freaks out there that don't want to, you know, conform with the typical gym athletic attire and um way of doing things. And so I was helping him start that company
I
at the
love
time.
that.
Yeah.
And I can see through your music and creative product projects that you're working on, like I can really see how you invite and ask people to take a risk
Hmm.
to then feel a deeper purpose of themselves. I can really see this because I can feel it when I listen to your music that
Yeah.
you're just like, hey, we're going to go here. We're going to take this risk with this music. So that adventurism plays out in your music.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh, that's really well said. Yeah, because my biggest fear is that I like push people too far. It's kind of what it feels like to me is it's almost like a dom sub relationship is what it feels like when I'm playing music, where it's like you have to know where the like boundaries are, but you also know that if you push people really far, they're going to have a good time. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like this
Yeah.
weird line being towed. And because my music is pretty heavy for the most part, I have this fear of like just blowing up the room, but I know if I push people far enough, they're going to have a great time. And that
Mm.
like in certain contexts and in the right energy, like 90 some percent of people love heavy, aggressive, explosive music. They just don't allow themselves the space to have that kind of catharsis or like experience.
Mhm.
And so it feels, yeah, it feels a lot like that, where,
Mm.
yes, there's like an exciting kind of, egotistical thing of like, look, listen to how loud and crazy this noise is. And, it's like that's a part of electronic music in general. But I also know that it serves a purpose because people can go, they can push where their edge is, and that feels really special. My favorite, or the thing that means the most to me that I hear a lot, is that people will say, "Man, I hate dubstep, but I love your music." And I'm
Mm.
like, I imagine that's because they can feel where I'm coming from in it, which is what you described.
Yeah. When I listen to your music, it's like the frequency of it speaks to me in a way that it was like exactly what I needed when I was listening to it in this weird way. Like it's flossing me at a cellular level and like wiping away shit that doesn't serve me anymore. And
Mm,
I legitimately feel like I can move forward with more purpose after I'll just put a song on random, and it just like fills me up, and it just cleans everything out that no longer serves me.
mm.
And it's the strangest thing. Like no other music does that. And I'll listen to a song of yours, I'll text you, I'll be like, what the fuck was that? That was absolutely incredible. That I didn't know I needed it. And it was just like, and I remember too, I played one of your new songs you had sent me. I played it for my brother, and my brother had a traumatic brain injury and could like hardly speak clearly and all of that. And he was like feeling it and like singing it with you. It's like he like locked in, and I was like, I recorded him, and I I remember I sent it to you. I was like, my brother knows how to sing your song. Like it was just like
Yeah.
this imprint, like you touch people with your music in a way that at first you might hear it and you're like, what the hell? And then all of a sudden it just takes over. And I remember I had my sister listen to it. She's huge into like EDM, all of that. And she was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard.
Hmm.
She's like, the way my body feels, it's not even what I'm listening to, it's how my body feels.
Yeah.
You're like bypassing people's mind, crawling into their body and say, hey, let's find more of you.
Yeah.
So I just
Wow.
appreciate that.
You should write ad copy for us when we're yeah. I I don't know why it happens. Like I'm not doing any of that intentionally, but I know it is there. Like it's
Uh-huh.
yeah, it just is what it is. And it feels like it's been that way since the beginning. Like even when I like sucked at producing objectively. I'll actually let you in on a secret. I suck at DJing. Like I actually am fucking terrible at it. But I know I have really good taste. And so I know what is serving the moment. And yeah, I make mistakes, but like I know what is there and can almost kind of predict how a event is going to feel, and can then select the music and the transitions and the high points and the low points. Like I can select that accordingly so that it's like a cohesive thing for people. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm not really like gifted at the art of DJing. Like in fact, on a mechanical level, like I'm kind of a fucking moron when it comes to doing that stuff. So um I think that it's what you're describing.
Yeah, and I can
Yeah.
see too. Yeah, I was just gonna say before you go there, Teresa, I just want to hop on over to 2343. This channel is called the Channel of Structuring. It provides breakthrough and insight for the other via like your own shit. So when you're
Uh,
sitting there and you're tinkering with your music, and then you're playing it, you're providing like, because looking at that, I'm like, no, it feels like when I listen to your music, it structures something inside of me.
yeah.
That's that genius part.
hmm
Mhm.
Go ahead with what you were going to say, Teresa. I know
I was going to
exactly.
say, like, when you're talking about going to these events and DJing, your environment is valleys, which are very acoustically sensitive people. Um, and you're feeling cognition or tone feeling, which means you pick up on the feeling, the overall feeling of a space, which is also acoustically sensitive. So
Yeah.
that's just what I was picking up on was
Mhm.
somebody whose values and feeling tone in their environment is going to almost like adjust to the environment and be picking up on those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking at your probability view and the conditioner. So your trajectory is, we're looking at conditioner versus, I can't remember the opposite right now. My brain's mush.
Conditioned.
Conditioned. You're conditioning people. So I just see your design. You're just you.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, I hope
fantastic.
so. I hope so. I do have to get going to the
Yeah. You have a
airport
flight
and
to
things like
catch.
that in a few minutes. Do you think do you cover what you wanted to
Absolutely.
cover?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to make sure
Yeah.
people can find you. So Wyatt's on Instagram. We will post it in the show notes as well. So you can find him directly. It's at wyattdixon.jlyi. Or at I Am Just Like You Imagined. And Just Like You Imagined, you can also find on Spotify.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So
That's what the JLYI stands for.
yeah,
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 I got it.
just like you imagined. And it
Got it right
is.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Thanks for coming on,
um
Wyatt.
Yeah,
yeah,
thank
thank
you.
you guys. Very insightful. It's reinforcing and I appreciate things that are like validating to my experience in some way so I can I guess feel more sure of myself in the future so that it's not so frustrating and
Mhm.
um yeah or so resistance bound. I know
Mhm.
resistance is important, but it's like you would like the big things to happen without the resistance. The resistance is in the creative process or the hard work that goes into fulfilling something. That's fine. It's the, big roadblocks and it's like, yeah, it's the roadblocks that feel like, I could avoid more of those
Mhm.
by, acting in accord with this stuff. So I always appreciate it.
Just leaning in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.